And we are now at Hartford House Antiques,
Yes.
which is in two
We
buildings,
have
correct?
two buildings.
One of the buildings here on the property, and this is such a unique building. It was moved here. You
It was
moved
disassembled down to a pile of logs
Okay.
and then rebuilt. It was either going to be burn it and have a wiener roast or put it up, and
Oh my gosh.
I made that decision.
Wow.
So it's the wing of the house that this came from. The salt box is that section. It contained one room, which was a kitchen, a small pantry, an inset porch with the well beneath so that it was protected, and a small bedroom. There was a main block that was lost in a fire. It was 2 stories, 2 rooms wide with a center fireplace, 2 fireplaces back to back. Second floor, 1 room with a fireplace, and then the 4 small rooms that were cordoned off in order to provide housing for the 4 men who built the church here in Hartford. And the church was built between 1819 and 21.
Okay.
So our belief is this house is a little bit older, about 1817, which is when the economy in Northeast Ohio begins to pick up after the problems with the War of 1812.
Okay. And the siding, is some of this original to
the siding is from another house.
Okay.
Unfortunately, one of the things you end up having to do in something like this, very seldom do you have a building that's completely intact. The window sash came from a local house where someone put in vinyl. The siding is oak off a house in central Ohio, a German house. The door frame and the window frames are from the same cabinet shop, but they were 2 separate houses. This house had lost its door. A house being demolished north of us still had it. There's 78 new pieces in that door to bring it back.
Oh my word.
The door frame. So we, 4 of the original windows survived. They were on the 2nd floor. The 1st floor had been removed and changed to new windows and a porch. So I salvaged those 4 windows from the 2nd floor, and in order to use them, I made the small addition to the side.
Okay.
The house actually, part of what helps us date it, it had wooden gutters.
Okay.
But they didn't have a downspout. They held water.
Oh, okay.
And the only reason I can think is that it held moisture, and that kept the shingles at the bottom swollen and tight, as opposed to very loose, cracking, and then the length of time it would take for them to swell and close in a storm.
Okay.
But one small section of the OG gutter, the original, remains over top of the 2 windows on the right. And to protect it, I just sent the roof out over top of it.
Okay. Oh my goodness.
And actually, the wing of this house exhibits the same tracks as this one. It had wooden gutters. It was in that same 1817 to 20 time period. But when it was brought around and attached to the tavern, it received a standard cornice that would match. So the gutters by that point were shot and taken off.
Okay.
And that's more than you ever wanted to know about it, didn't it?
No, should we go inside?
Sure.
All right. So it's on a new foundation,
Yes.
correct? Yep. And this door is so impressive.
The church that I mentioned that they built carried the same trim as this door.
Okay.
So someone doing cabinet work in town was creating all of that.
My goodness. So, such craftsmen.
The fireplace was gone.
Okay.
We had the marks in the floor, and we had photographs of an 1804 house nearby that was taken down in the 1960s. But they'd actually taken the building apart, left this giant mass of stones, photographed it before demolishing
Oh,
it.
wow.
So this duplicates what was just down the street.
Okay. And I notice it's an internal fireplace. It's not like an exposed on the outside. It's
Basically what happens, New England tends to put their fireplaces, their chimneys in the center,
okay. Yep.
unless it's a masonry house or just a single room where it has to be an end. Pennsylvania brings them inside, but in the ends rather than the center of the house.
Okay.
And as soon as you get a little farther south to Virginia, then they begin to set them on the outside.
On the outside.
It has to do with climate and
Okay.
holding as much heat in as you can. Pennsylvania, it's not as big a deal. And Virginia, it's get the heat out.
Get the heat out. That makes sense. And that would have been a cooking fireplace
Yes.
as well, right? So all the
Yes.
more reason to.
Well, you would always have a fire in this fireplace.
Okay.
In fact, the main block of the house, the stairs, were entered through the wall in between the wing, and you would have gone up. That would have allowed you to open the door and put heat into the second floor.
Okay.
They talk about all these old houses, and they tend to call it a servant stairs.
Okay.
But really, it's there to be able to move heat
The heat.
out of that kitchen into the rooms, because that's, if you were economizing, that's the only fireplace you had going.
Okay. And so this section over here
This
would have
is-
been where the.
This is brand new, but there would have been a door here. The stairs were entered from over there, but climbed straight up. A chimney at the center with a fireplace to each side. Door or windows that direction out. And then another room that was basically the same on the other side. A single door and window to the outside.
Okay.
So it had a fairly formal front facing the green, and then the sides were very plain and the back was very plain.
And the house was committed to house 4 workers, was
Yeah,
that right?
it
To build
did.
the church.
Yes. We see things, not long ago, the house of the clockmaker in Vienna was knocked down. And it looked like he had an enormous amount of money from the size of the house. But he was boarding all the workmen.
Okay.
There
So
might
they
have
were
been-
being
There might have been 15 or 20 people in that house.
so they were being supported by
Yes.
like a room and board. Okay.
So this room is new construction. The trim duplicates what's in a house down the street. The rafters I saved because one of the builders signed his name up there in red crayon.
Oh my gosh.
Robinson Truesdale, who did the house where this woodwork is copied. So
Okay. Is it visible where the signature is?
it's a little tight, but it's a red crayon right up here. And it simply says Robinson.
Oh yeah, you can see it.
If I'd have been smart, I'd have just got a red crayon and forged it somewhere else, and I wouldn't have had to do all this work.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. Is there a name for that style of the woodwork?
No, the man it was very inventive. He worked in our clock industry for a while, and his clock cases were as inventive as his
Oh my
buildings.
gosh, that's just gorgeous. And you are quite a clock collector, I know.
I've researched the Ohio wood movement clock industry. Rebecca Rogers is the person that basically established that the industry existed, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to extend on her work.
This is just stunning. How about the floors? Did those?
The floors are salvaged from other buildings.
Okay.
This floor is from this building, but was not in this position. This position didn't exist at the time.
Okay.
The floor in here is done with the flooring that was in the room. And a little aside, you'll notice how the seam runs a distance and then picks up over there and runs.
Right.
At times when you had money and labor, you would extend a board, match its width by hand, extend it, do the next one. So every board would have a companion board made for it. Here, this is indicative of a time period that things aren't very good. There's not a lot of labor. So they would lay the straight boards, the long ones, all the way to here, and then add these. And when they get to here, or I guess going this way, that's when they make the one that matches it, then they move the lap to the other side. It's just evidence of kind of the privations going on at the time period.
Okay.
We don't begin to take off in Northeast Ohio until about 1819, and the real prosperity kicks in 20 and 21. It has to do with what's known as the year without a summer. That was a climactic disaster in New England, and it resulted in, it was volcanoes, clouds of ash,
So
and
it
it
didn't
blocked
get
out
hot
the
enough.
sun.
Okay.
And they had killer frost and snow every month of the year.
Oh my goodness.
Starvation, and it triggered a push this direction. And as people came, so did the craftsmen, because everybody that came had to bring their basics in 2 or 3 blanket boxes, and that's all they could bring. And when they
Sure.
got here, they needed everything. We actually have what I term barter houses. If you were here 1805 and your family had worked and you'd cleared land and you had this large expanse, when people came out, they needed to buy animals and land and everything. And all they had was their future labor. So in a barter economy,
Okay.
that's kind of hard to collect. But if you kept trading that back and forth, you could accumulate the labor and materials, and you would bank it building a house or a barn. And our very finest early houses all come from about 1821 to 26 or 27, and they're barter houses.
Barter.
So
Okay.
it's a
So they
completely
probably
different
came
way.
with their tools as much as they could.
Well, they
did they
did,
bring
but
the tools that they?
What you would have is the craftsmen from New England are coming out here and they're setting up shop.
Okay.
Because the market moved from New England to here. Because all of a sudden, as New England's depopulating, there's not a lot of work for them. But the work's out here.
Okay. Wow. Just fascinating. I love our history. People always say we have so many of these wonderful early antiques here in Ohio, and that's a great testament to why so much of it.
Well, and one of the surprises, if you will, particularly with the clocks, during the 1950s and 60s, the market for antiques was very much New England.
Okay.
Not so much out here. The furniture made out here from 1820 to 1830 or so looks like what they left in New England, but they made it here. The dealers picked this area mercilessly and shipped it
Okay.
to New England and sold it as New England. Many of the clocks that we have found, they've said, well, those were New England and the guys out west just put their name on it. And that's not the case, but that's how you sold them. And we've bought several local clocks that were in New England collections because there weren't enough
They
New
looked
England
like-
clocks to fill the collections, but there were plenty of Ohio to
Okay.
add.
And the craftsmen were from New England that had come here.
It looks
and
exactly the same. The only difference is the pine is the secondary wood up there, and here the secondary wood's usually poplar.
okay, because that's what they would have had.
That's what was available.
Amazing. It's funny how the clock's time tells such a story.
I truly believe that if you understand how to read objects, specifically houses, but other, you'll get a much truer sense of history than you will from what the people wrote. Because whatever they wrote, in many cases, was how they wanted to be remembered or, well, establishing something. The 1880s history book from here, the grandchildren of the people who first came here are telling stories about how few people there were and how far it was to the nearest neighbor. And meanwhile, there's a German guy in Pennsylvania 2 miles away on the state line who has a mill. He's been there quite a while. But the New England people don't even mention the Pennsylvania German.
Okay.
We see that in houses. The Pennsylvania German were looking for land, and they were apolitical. They would work wherever they could find a farm.
Okay.
So we see Pennsylvania houses in the Western Reserve. The New England people didn't like each other, and they liked everyone else even less. And there are no New England style houses on the other side of the state line or south of Western Reserve Road. They didn't settle there.
Okay.
Clear into the 1820s, we see letters that the address is New Connecticut. It's not Ohio. They were pretty much determined they were rebuilding
They were
Connecticut
not going
out
to
here,
be. Okay.
and
They
they'd
were
get
not
their way
going to be
eventually.
Ohioans.
Yeah.
Just incredible. So they kind of created their own urban legend a little bit because
Well,
that's what they wanted it to be.
The ones who came out attempted to recreate much of Connecticut. Connecticut was a theocracy. It's the Congregational Church was established in the Connecticut colonial charter. People were taxed for the support of that church.
Okay.
And folks that came out here, many of them thought, well, we need to replicate that. They didn't. They didn't have much success. We came across a notebook of the Society for the Promotion of Morals in the Connecticut Western Reserve. It was 1816. And it was signed by David Hudson and basically everybody who was someone out here, landholders established.
And
That
Hudson, we know,
Yes.
Hudson, Ohio. So
that was the first year. The second year, it was mostly the ministers, and it was like if somebody's swearing, you need to tell us, or no, you need to tell them.
okay.
The third year, it was just ministers, and it was down to you need to report somebody if they're not acting right. They didn't last very long.
Yeah, that's not gonna fly well.
But there really was a fear that if people were too far away from a religious center, they would stray.
Okay.
And I think that's right. But
As long as it was the correct religious center, because each of them had their own, and they were pretty.
It's not too bad because all of the denominations that are here, at least initially, are somewhat similar. And as I said, the Germans, they just they almost ignore them.
Okay.
One of our oddities is the Western Reserve is surveyed into 5 mile squares, and every one of those lots had a value applied to it. The men that bought the Western Reserve, called the Western Reserve Land Company, Connecticut Land Company, I'm sorry.
Okay.
They drew lots, and whatever you drew, that's yours to develop. If you sold your land going south and you sold it in Pennsylvania, you got a very German town. So in Poland, Canfield, Boardman, much of that was German.
Okay.
Other towns like Hartford was almost entirely sold in Northwest Connecticut. So our houses are what they remembered in Northwest Connecticut. Those houses in the south are what they remember from Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So every township has a remnant of an ethnic flavor in the houses they have based on how that initial land was sold.
That is just amazing. Wow. I miss that, parts of that, and now the tract houses that are so
Well,
nondescript.
once you get out, really into the 1850s with the advent of rail and also printing. Houses begin to look the same. So you might see the same Gothic house in Kentucky that you see in New England.
Okay.
Everything becomes homogenized, and when it does, the houses get less interesting.
Sure.
Because the story of ethnicity and whether or not they had enough money to do the floor
To
right,
complete it, right.
all of that kind of disappears.
And then eventually Sears Roebuck, even you can buy
Mm-hmm.
houses as a kit.
Yeah, and everything begins to look the same. So
And less of the craftsmen with their hands on. My goodness. And all of this is available to walk through and purchase pieces of these amazing antiques that furnish this building. And we'll go over to the larger building also here in just a couple minutes. This really looks like
it looks like an 18th century tavern.
it sure does.
Yep. Yeah. The only response we get is, "Where's the alcohol?"
Yeah. Sure. That fireplace is amazing. Is it a working fireplace?
Yes.
Do you have it set?
It's completely built to modern standards.
Gosh.
But the gentleman that did it, these large foundation stones were about the right size, but he cut and put a brand new face on it, hand worked all of this,
It's
and
just
colored it to make it seamless.
just stunning.
The back he did and worked it to appear as though there's been a fire there long enough to erode the mortar
Okay.
to give it the age.
Right.
The beam across the top is actually a lintel beam from a house that was torn down and fit exactly to the size. And this is the cap off somebody's front door.
Oh my goodness. And then over the top that
That was a door that fell apart and I reconfigured.
it is just beautiful. And I love the coloring on these pieces. I know you're having some of the walls painted
she
now.
is blended, but I'm hoping to just leave this the way it is.
Yeah. That's really
But because we had to salvage boards from many buildings and many projects,
sure. You get such a mixture that then it kind of takes away.
yeah, it's there's a trick to blending it to make it look as though it belongs together.
Oh my gosh. And the boards in the ceiling too are just lovely. So how long have you been a collector of not just antiques, but buildings?
One of the first dates my wife and I had, we borrowed a truck and went and salvaged out the parlor woodwork of a building in Newton Falls.
Oh,
We were 17.
how awesome is that? That's neat.
Well,
And you knew you had a good partner willing to do stuff like that. Beautiful pieces. Just stunning. Is there an open house coming up again? Is it around the Christmas?
I believe one is, I think he has something scheduled in September.
Okay. So I did a quick map quest before I came in, and it looks like we're about an hour and 20 minutes from Pittsburgh to kind of give you a lay of the land. And I know many of our viewers are familiar with Seville Antiques, and we're about an hour and 25 minutes east of Seville Antiques. So if that kind of gives you an idea, we're just about in the middle between Seville
About 10
and...
miles north of the interstate, Route 80,
Okay.
and on the Pennsylvania state line.
Just beautiful, beautiful pieces. And in what an amazing setting. Look at that oyster two-door cabinet is incredible. the LED lights are perfect. Like they just give you the light, but they're not in the way. And the banister back chairs. I see lots of, if our viewers haven't noticed, the hog scraper candlesticks here and there. Love the child's chair. Lots of tiger maple. Absolutely love the history lesson. So hopefully our viewers, if you are enjoying that as well, hit like, make sure you comment in the comment section as well, and hit that subscribe button as well. So our next video, because I'm seeing in the time of this one, we're going to go ahead and tour the larger portion of the antique shop that is directly across the street from this building here. But I'll make sure to have some images of the outside of that one as well. They are open this Saturday also. And I'll make sure that the address is also on the screen and in the description. And they do ship. So if there is something that you see that you would be interested in, don't hesitate to reach out.